Welcome back. I'm McNew. This is Duty, Grit, and Grinds. Got another episode with my wife today. Felicia's back on the show, riding off the coattails of the stories we told last time. She's graciously agreed to return. I had spent an episode a while back talking about my background in cycling. I am by no means an actual professional. I'm not even that good at it, but I do enjoy it a great deal, and I've done a lot of cycling. And so naturally, when we got together 10 years ago or so, she was a natural athlete, and it seemed obvious that I would just invite her to come along and see if this could become the hobby that we enjoyed together. And so as I tend to do, I encouraged her to jump both feet into the pool without a life vest and just go straight into it, full bore. And, you know, the rest, it will tell that story in the episode. And so coming up, an episode about our kind of experience cycling and a couple of other physical journeys. We touch a little bit on parenting with the intent of raising young, independent adults and the lessons in discipline and grit that come along with that and contribute to it. And we touch briefly on a physical challenge that we did and kind of why and the fun we had doing that and how it plays into the story. So the episode's going to start. I hit record as my wife Felicia was reading an excerpt on a World War II hero named Eugene Sledge. What does it say about Eugene Sledge?
This says, Eugene Sledge, author of With the Old Breed at Pelelu and Okinawa, shares a striking and memorable story about his boots during his time as a Marine in the Pacific during World War II. One of the key aspects of his narrative involves the terrible conditions faced by soldiers, and his boots became symbolic of the suffering and hardships they endured. In the book, Sledge describes how his boots were constantly soaked, filthy, riddled with mud, sweat, and blood. The terrain in places like Pelelu and Okinawa was brutal, and the Marines had to deal with not only the threat of enemy fire, but also extreme conditions like humidity, rain, and muck. The boots became so worn that they offered little protection and contributed to the constant discomfort and pain. Sledge's boots also symbolize the dehumanizing toll of war. He describes how the constant wear and tear on his boots mirrored the constant physical and mental strain on himself and his comrades. Over time, his boots were falling apart, but they were a necessary companion for survival, and leaving them behind wasn't an option. The boots became emblematic of the Marine experience, a necessary tool, but one that could never offer relief, just as the men had to endure despite the unbearable circumstances. Sledge's vivid descriptions bring this detail to life, offering a personal and greedy insight into the harsh realities of war.
So that's what the internet says about Eugene Sledge. Conversation started because, so put a pin in Eugene Sledge.
Okay.
And so when we got together and got married and started, second life, I had been cycling for a long time, and I've told stories about cycling on here. I had done the Seattle to Portland ride. I told the story about how Dr. Aaron, my doctor and friend, convinced me to do it in the one day. So 207 miles in one day, even though I'd owned a bike for like a month. And he took me on a 9-mile test ride basically and said, "You'll be fine." And of course he was right. But, and then I started cycling and I rode it, say 4 more times after that and then I also got into some pretty serious mountain biking. And then that was like a solid 8-10 years where I was just like cycling constantly. And I slowly kind of fell away from road cycling in favor of mountain biking. For starters, in a shorter amount of time, it was a lot more work. Of course, the road cycling for hundreds of miles is a feat of endurance, but as far as a hard interval workout, I love mountain biking. I also loved going really fast. down the side of a mountain or whatever. And so I guess I liked the thrill of mountain biking. And to me, road cycling was a feat of endurance, but was not thrilling. And so when you came along naturally as a natural athlete, I, of course, said, well, you should start cycling, which led to the purchase of a road bike and mountain bike at some point. Yeah. And so you similarly have this mountain bike or this road bike, a Carbon LaPierre road bike, nice road bike, for all of like 5 minutes or a month. And I say, we should do the STP and we should do it in one day. And that is the seat of the pants sort of, we are transformed by suffering mindset that I carry through life. And you're not like that. And so you have a road bike for all of a minute. And I say, let's do the STP and let's do it in one day. And so what do you remember about that?
I remember, let's see. Yeah, I mean, we had just started road biking and I liked it. I enjoyed it. And I will still say to this day that it's my favorite sport that I've ever done. I love the wind through my hair and in my face. And if it weren't for people on phones on the road, I feel like I could do it every day. And it's not fair because it burns so many calories and it doesn't even feel like a workout because I love it so much. But yes, I do recall you saying we should do the STP and it being in a very short time period. And it's not just athleticism that you have to be okay with on a road cycling race because you are with a lot of other bikes. So you have to be comfortable being passed and passing and what you're going to expect with accidents and
so like the STP it's 10,000 plus cyclists and some of them are really serious. And if you're in the 1 day group, you're riding with the really serious cyclists.
And so, I've been riding a bike for 4 weeks. So, and Brandon did it his first time too. So props, Brandon.
So we did coincidentally, we did the same test ride that Sean took me on and said, you'll be fine. And so one of the things that is complicated about riding in a group is passing. Well, it's etiquette. And it's, we start talking about drafting and how important that is. Like it's not NASCAR, but drafting is when you're new to it, drafting is surprisingly important in road cycling. Like it makes a big difference. It's a 10 mile an hour difference on the straight stretch. And so they start talking about drafting and how close you have to be to do that. And we're talking like, the width, it's like 3 inches off a tire. And the penalty for overlapping tires is so great.
It's a big crash.
Because just in the years I've done it, and I don't remember if there was a crash the year we did it, but I have seen so many crashes, like horrific, like bike shredding, like IndyCar, and they just fly to pieces. Those sorts of crashes at high speeds, and so those long pelotons were one little overlap of a tire and crash. So, and I probably told you that while we were training, and that probably got you really excited. And so, so we train to ride this Seattle to Portland, and of course you do it and you do fine. Like you get to a point, I don't know, 150 miles in where you're like, this is terrible, but I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
So
I can't feel my hands or my feet, but I can make it. Yeah.
When I tell people about doing the Seattle to Portland or any long endurance ride, be it mountain biking or road cycling, the first thing they always say is, my butt. They talk about like, how could you sit on the seat? And listen, if you're having butt pain, like the kind that you get when you get on a bike when you haven't been on one in a while, if you're getting that during one of these endurance rides, like you didn't train. Like, so because there is saddle soreness, but it's different. And so if your butt hurts, it's because you didn't ride your bike. And so what really starts to happen, and this was like an actual shock to me because I was actually like nervous about it, is, and it'll be maybe different for everyone, but you get like weird positional pains. Yeah. Like I got really weird numbness in my pinkies from just, being locked and whatever. Yeah. I'm not a doctor, but whatever that does to your nerves. I had numbness in my pinkies, your back gets sore because you're just in that position for so long. It's on my best year, I was in the saddle for 11 hours and that was cooking. And total time was 13 hours. So, and that the other 2 hours, of course, are just pit stops. Yeah. And so that's a long time to be in one position in a day.
What did we do it in?
It was closer to 13 overall, or rather 13 saddle time.
Okay.
15 overall. Yeah. So that year I rode it. Actually, side story, the year I rode it in 11, it was 11 something. I had not ridden my bike since the previous STP, my road bike.
You just ridden mountain bike?
Yeah. And like, it was like, I knew that I would be in reasonably good shape to ride the road bike. And so I wasn't really worried about it. And so right before the STP, I jumped on my road bike, having not ridden it since the previous year, but ridden hours and hours and hours and days of mountain bike stuff, like interval stuff. It was just really serious mountain biking. And so then I get on my road bike to shake the dust off, ride, the little 12 mile loop that we do here.
Hey, it's 14 miles. Okay. The short loop is 14 miles.
So
and it's very hilly. So it's a good interval workout.
So I knocked the dust off doing that, and I'm like, all right, bike still works or whatever. Tires are good or whatever. And then I go ride the STP, and I was just in the best cycling shape of my life. And my takeaway was like that there's just such a difference in the value of
interval training works.
Yeah, interval training works
for sure.
Yeah,
that'll whip you right into shape.
So you do like cycling, but you have an aversion to mountain biking. I thought, naturally, you will enjoy, if you like road biking, man, wait until you get out on a mountain bike.
Yeah.
And we are doing some, like, similar to, like, you'll be fine, let's go do the STP in one day. We're doing, like, some pretty gnarly, call it black diamond type trails, like, not right off the bat, but pretty early on. We're coming. My favorite way of mountain biking, let me just back up one step, is to grind out long climbs so that I can get to the top of something. I don't mind the climb. I know, like, downhill racers, they just take the ski lift or whatever, but I prefer the bell curve of gutting out a long climb for the satisfaction of coming down like my hair's on fire, down single track trail. Yeah. And so, of course, that's what we do. And you are a force to be reckoned with on the climbs. But coming down, I found myself waiting a lot.
Yeah. Well, I am kind of a weenie.
A chicken.
Yes, I am kind of a chicken. And so I struggle with those intense speeds and navigating and trusting what a mountain bike can do. And I did grow in that way, especially after I got a better mountain bike. So that did help me a little bit, but I tend to think maybe if you hit a certain point in your life and you haven't experienced those types of thrilling maneuvers, that it's just very difficult to get used to. So I pretty regularly would be on a mountain bike trail going downhill, way behind you, way slower, getting passed by, little 8-year-old boys, just like, watch out, old lady, jumping over me on their bikes. And that's just how it was. And I would tell you, I'll see you at the bottom. I'm going to go slow. I'm not going to jump logs and rocks and go over cliffs. It's just not for me. So it never really got to be easier for me. I do like the climbing, though. I do like it.
So insult to injury, we go to Bend, Oregon, probably the best place in the whole world to ride mountain bikes. Moab was pretty fun too, but Bend, Oregon is within driving distance, probably my favorite place to ride mountain bikes. Beautiful terrain, there's a variety of trails. Anyways, we are there for, a while, like 4 days. We're there for a while.
Yeah.
And one of the days we are going to do a long ride. And so we've got this thing, and what was it, like 30 something miles, which is a long ways on a mountain bike in high desert. This is, we're talking 6,000, 7,000 foot elevation, and a variety of gains and losses throughout. So pretty hard riding. We're not talking flat 30 miles. This is like a ton of elevation. So, and we set out in the late morning from our car, and we are making our way through a couple-year-old forest fire area that was really cool. We make it into some dense old growth. We are in the high mountains, and it's taking a lot longer than we thought. Oh, and we're stopping a lot because there were a lot of crisscross trails, and because of the forest fire, like not everything was marked, and so we had the map out a lot. And so we stopped to be sure we were going the right way, basically. I had a physical map out a bunch, just making sure we knew where we were.
Yeah.
And so that caused increase in time also. And so at some point, we get to, say, the halfway point, because it's a big loop that we cross the main highway by way of this little park. And by that point, like, was pretty apparent that we were way behind, and it was starting to get not dark, but in the forest, you were aware that
we were fighting time.
That darkness
time was not
coming
on our side,
right?
Yeah.
And so we get to what should have been the most fun trail for me, which was this like trail with huge berms and jumps and things like that. But we are so smoked by then that you can't even enjoy this trail.
Hey, I actually was going fast that day because I was so tired that I couldn't grip the brakes as well as I usually did. So I was like, I just flying down.
We seriously miscalculated how much effort it was going to take to get this loop done in this day. And then on top of that, we're racing sunset, and this is summer, so sunset would have been late into the evening. But so we end up finally connecting at least to a trail system that I had ridden before. But by then it is like in the forest, it's dark.
It was dark.
And we got no lights. And so we are fortunately, your eyes adjust enough that we're able to navigate in the forest and make our way.
Well, that's not how I remember it quite.
Oh, yeah. Okay. How do you remember it?
Well, I remember that you got us lost and that we saw somebody else who was lost also. And it was not.
Well, lost isn't quite fair.
Okay. Well, we had taken the wrong trail.
There were a couple of trails that would get us back to the trail. They all led back to the trailhead. One was shorter.
True. Yeah. And at that point, we realized we had taken the longer route, even though we were in the dark. Excuse me. And also, we did have lights. We had iPhone lights, which is really, really hard to use. Excuse me. When you're holding onto a bike with both hands.
So we ride back out to the car, and actually we have a picture of the car running with the lights on as I'm loading in the pitch black dark the bikes on the roof rack at that time. Yeah.
You guys, it was actually a miracle that we did not crash, because this trail system in Bend, like there's so many parts of the trail where like your bike handles just barely fit through two trees, and it was pitch black. And so we're just following the trails, and I believe I was singing possibly praying, just hoping that I wasn't going to crash into a big old stump or something. But that was quite the experience. But I'm really, really grateful that we made it out. No one crashed. We weren't hurt. So we made it.
So
we should put that picture up so people can see.
I'll have to see if I can find it.
Okay.
I think it's on Facebook. So, I mentioned like the pain, growth through suffering, like that mindset, and it's, mountain biking and whatever, but, we also kind of parent that way. And so, and just like boy or girl, in the spirit of not raising weak children and growing independent adults, we allow them to join us in our misery. Yeah. And so, and they don't always love it, but some of them, the ones that are out of the house, they exhibit grit. And some of that is due to, making them rake leaves in the rain and learn to road bike, even though it's hard and they're not good at it. And so over the years, we've tried to introduce a couple of the different kids to road cycling, and with mixed results. So we have had a mix of different levels of athletic ability in the kids. And so the oldest, we get her on a road bike because she's a doer. She's up for that kind of thing. She's the oldest. She's an oldest child. So she decided she'll join us. And I think that's the one where you suggested maybe just a ride down to the stop sign, which is about a mile, cruise around the parking lot. Is this that one? And, just let her get the hang of it. And I believe I said something like, she's fine. She's fine. She'll figure it out. And so we end up on, we did our training. We did, but we added that one loop. No. So we did about 14 miles. Yeah. So we're on.
You're thinking of Josie's.
Okay. So we're on the big hill. Oh, that's right. Because we went all the way out by Ray's house. So that's right. So there's a big hill. Just one of them. There's some rolling hills, but there's one pretty good sized hill. And no, there's two. There's one. There's two good hills. Yeah. There's one before that exit and one after. So we are on the we're on the second one. And Casey, so what are we? We're 8-10 miles in, and we're like pulling no punches. We're just gutting out this climb or this ride. And she like pulls over the side of the road and starts vomiting. Yeah. And so
out of nowhere, because if it's one thing the McNews do exhibit is just endless confidence. And
what I'll say, just to be clear, this is the same. So she was probably 16, 15, 16 then. When she was not, I just looked this up the other day. When she was 9, she was on a specialized adult size extra small hardtail mountain bike in her first mountain bike race. I just got pictures of it. Yeah. So
and she's amazing.
This is a 9-year-old who was racing mountain bikes with grown-ups. Right. At 9 years old. And so it's not like it was her first time on a bicycle. No. So
but road biking is different.
It is different. It is different.
And honestly, she got right back on that bike and finished that ride.
Yeah. This is the same girl that same bike, her, me, and Sean, the doctor, are mountain biking in Hood River, Oregon. And she is taking corners. She carves a corner really hard, hooks her pedal and crashes. And she crashes so hard, she broke the faceplate of a race face stem plate. So
that big scar on her hip.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And so, in fact, I sent a picture of that and her in that crash to Raceface, and said, "Hey, I know this is out of warranty, but my 9-year-old just broke this in a crash," and they sent me a new one. So actually, she was a little bit older then. The race was when she was 9. She was 10 or 11 by then. But so, we've had some of the other kids out just. Road cycling is a good way to develop grit and guts and barfing. And, you said before we hit record, one of the kids, Josie, we do the big loop, we call it. And that one's closer to 25.
Yeah, 25 or 26 miles.
Yeah. And we got back to here and she basically fell over, getting off the bike, just collapsed. So
sometimes it's too much to get your cleats out. She didn't even care. She's just like, I don't care. I'm done.
So, and that's, like I mentioned, raking leaves in the rain and like getting up early and doing work. Like that's just part of raising independent people. Like if you're in the world long enough, like you recognize that not everyone is raising their kids to be strong and independent. And that's what we're looking for, is strong, independent people capable to go out and contribute to the world. And so, and this is just one of the ways that we do that. And so I could probably think of other examples, maybe you can, of I'm thinking of ways that we've imparted that on the kids just through parenting, like kitchen cleanup, we call it. I mean, it's not like an original term or anything, but like around here, we primarily do the cooking. And since they were very small, the kids clean up the kitchen, clear the dining room table. And, like that's their contribution. And to this day, if one of the adult kids comes over, like they help with kitchen cleanup, and it's just, helping them learn to pull their weight and not hand them everything day to day. And so that's not a extreme example of grit, but it is, some days they want to leave the dinner table and go about their day and they've got work to do. So it's just one of the lessons we've imparted on them. And so there have been many other things, examples of grit and things like that we try and impart on them. So,
well, and I will say that, all of our kids experience leadership in the areas that they are talented at or have some gifts in, whether that's sports or academics. They excel and they lead. And I think that's partly because,
Yeah, that's true. I was thinking of Claire when she worked her first job at the nursery, the farm or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
The plant nursery, and how it's miserable and she hated it. And she, personality wise, tends to be an indoor girl. And so an outdoor job was, wouldn't have been her first choice, but, she wanted to work, she wanted to pay for her car, and this was what was hiring. And so she got this job. And so it was any of us would have considered it just miserable work because it's raining and they're outside and they're mucky and muddy and rain or shine, they're out there weeding this big nursery, and it was terrible. And, she comes home one day and they were all vocal to object about some of the grit lessons we would teach them.
Yeah.
And she probably most vocal of all about griping to us. And so, but she comes home and she tells us the story about how the boss comes out in this miserably terrible day and says, "Hey, you guys, come in. It's terrible out there right now. It's cold. They're all teeth chattering." And she says, "But I really didn't feel that bad or that cold or whatever. It was like, I can finish this row or I can finish this task." And so she said, "I just told them I'm fine, leave me alone." And she said, "I just kept pulling weeds in the pouring rain." And it was like, yeah, all right. Victory.
Yeah.
And so, Josie gets a job at a sporting goods store that her sister had worked at previously. And her first week of work, she gets like the plague. You remember this? Mm. And it was like, I want to say it was like her second day. And she's like, "Dad, I don't know what to do. I'm like dying. I can barely get out of bed." And I said, "Now, hear me out to the end of the story." She says, "What do I do?" I said, "You go to work." And flash forward, she calls me from work and she says, "Dad, they're sending me home." I said, "Okay, go get some rest." And later when we talked about it, I said, "Dude, kid, I knew you're 16 years old working in a sporting goods store. running a cash register. I knew the second you walked in looking like that, they were going to send you home. But guess what? You can't do on your second day of work, call in sick.
Yeah.
You just can't, because no matter how sick you are, it's your second day of work, and you just don't have the trust capital with your employer yet that they believe you're anything. In today, in the workforce, what we see is just so many people who are so quick to call in sick and just leave their employer hanging. And unfortunately, that would have been the assumption.
Yeah.
And so if I could back up, when her sister was first applying, I ran into the owner, and I knew him just through the community. And I said, hey, just so you know, and he wasn't involved in the hiring process. I said, just so you know, my kid here, she applied to work here. I said, he goes, oh, what'd you apply to do? And she says, whatever you need. She goes, I'll sweep the floor. And they got ammo. She says, I'll carry pallets from the back room. I'll work cash register, whatever. I can learn to do any job. And he kind of nodded and said, if you come to work when you're scheduled, you'll be better than most. Yeah. And so that would have been about 2 years before this thing with Josie being sick on her second day at that same sporting goods store. And that's in my mind, and I've seen it also, but that kind of cultural shift to just blowing off work and leaving your employer high and dry, unfortunately, that would have been the assumption, even though she had the plague or whatever it was. And so when I knew full well that she would show up to work and they would say, what the heck are you doing here? Go home. And so that's what I told her on the phone. Of course they're sending you home, Josie, but you had to go, so they would send you home. And she totally understands that, And so those sorts of little micro lessons through life, I think, have contributed to the success that our kids are experiencing right now as adults. We got one away at college, who's living on her own with roommates and killing it in some pretty hard curriculum, graduated with an AA degree through Running Start. Got one who's working a full-time job, going through EMT school. We ain't raising no slouch. So I lay all that foundation because if I could go back to Eugene Sledge.
Okay.
And the reason you were looking up Eugene Sledge while we started record on this episode. So one June, we had a week-long trip planned to Bend. We mentioned it earlier, one of our favorite destinations I don't like to vacation. We talked about this just recently. Unless you just insisted, I think a cruise would just be the worst way to spend my money. To sit in a floating hotel and watch the water go by. I actually think I might track down the crew and ask if they had any jobs that I might be able to do while we're there. Yeah. So and I think you enjoy, unless you're just humoring me, I think you also enjoy activity vacations, like cycling and hiking and things like that. Although we like to be comfortable. We've tried campering and things like that. We like nice hotels. We like to come home after a hard day of physical activity and take a shower and be clean and eat. And so we love the vacations or the trips to Bend for the physical activity and the food. And so one June, we set out for a week-long thing, and you were considering a physical challenge to kind of get whatever, your mindset right, your nutrition right, cut some weight maybe. And we are an hour into our drive, and you say, hey, I'm interested in doing this challenge. Will you do it with me? And my memory is I didn't even know what it was. And I was like, oh, we're doing a challenge? Sign me up.
I think what I said is, I'm doing this challenge. And then you said, me too.
Okay, that sounds right.
Without skipping a beat. So, but I had already started. So
that day. So, and that's important because you play the podcast, or I think it was a podcast.
Yeah,
you play a podcast episode, and you're like, here's the challenge. And I listened to this episode, and it lays out this very specific challenge. And so the challenge itself, 75 Hard, has got quite a bit of critique from the fitness industry and weight loss culture or whatever. And I think that comes from a misunderstanding of what it is. Because if you know the 75 Hard Challenge, it is not something that is sustainable forever. It is a grueling 75 days. It is a feat of grit and determination, mindset and discipline. And it builds in 75 days. You do build some habits.
Yeah.
But I don't believe for a minute you could or should do it forever. And so for 75 days, no cheat days, no failures, miss one checkbox any of the days, and you fail and have to start over. We did 75 days in 75 days, 75 hard in 75 days on our first attempt.
Yeah.
And it started this first day in June, or rather on this trip to Bend in June, which actually worked out as a really nice primer because we're on this vacation and we can kind of control our lives. Fitness was easy. And so here's the challenge. Every day you have to take a progress picture.
Yeah.
So in the mirror, a progress picture, not naked, but basically in your underwear or shorts progress picture, you have to drink a gallon of water. No matter how big or small you are, a gallon of water. Mm-hmm. You have to do 2 separate 45-minute workouts every day. One of them has to be outside, rain or shine.
Yep.
You have to read 10 pages in a self-help book. And you have to follow a nutritional plan that is healthy. Yes. You get to pick it. It doesn't have to be it's not a diet. It's just you have to follow a plan that you set. That's the discipline of it. But it also has to be healthy. No cookies, we're not having cookies, cakes, pies, or things like that. Although I think there was some allowance in there if that was a part of the plan you were on. I don't remember that exactly. And then no alcohol, which wasn't actually a challenge for us. And so I listened to the podcast that explains this. I think the episode, what's that guy's name? Andrew something.
Andy Frisella.
Yeah. He explains it really well as not, this is not a lifelong thing. This is a 75-day challenge to build grit, to build discipline, to
mental fortitude. It is not a fitness challenge. No. It's a
if you're following it, you can't help but see physical results. And so the point of the progress picture, for example, is there were plenty of nights where I'm laying in bed at the end of the night, checking off all my boxes. And because that's a small detail, taking the picture is an insignificant thing that takes like 2 minutes. But it's also easy to forget because it's an insignificant thing that takes like 2 minutes. And so if you struggle with small details, there were plenty of nights where it's almost bedtime and I'm like, I didn't take my progress picture. So I go running into the full length mirror in our bathroom and take this quick picture. And so things like that. Another thing, drinking a gallon of water, one of the criticisms is that that's not healthy. Well, I don't think that it was unhealthy. We were exercising a lot and it was summertime. And so we were sweating our butts off. What it is hard to actually physically consume a gallon of water in a day if you don't start first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
On the days when you wake up in the morning and have a couple bottles of water, or whatever, let's just say 24 ounces of water in the first couple hours of being awake, those days tended to be pretty easy water consumption wise. If you got to dinner time and for whatever reason you lacked discipline that day and hadn't had any water at all, those days sucked because you're guzzling water at bedtime and then you're up all night going to the bathroom. And so again, drinking a gallon of water every day for the rest of your life is like you there's a point where you're not even hydrating anymore. We were just peeing constantly.
Yeah.
And so, but it was a physical challenge and a matter of discipline to remember to start drinking water first thing in the morning. And so, and then reading 10 pages if you had a busy day. Sometimes when you got in bed, it was hard. That one really wasn't that hard. We found a handful of things to read that we got through.
The outdoor workout was difficult. Like we went on a lot of what I called sleepwalks through the neighborhood.
Yeah. And again, the exercise, it didn't call for what it needed to be. And so a lot of times, and I think early on we did a lot more physical stuff, But as the challenge wore on and you're just getting by, our exercise for the outdoor workout was a brisk neighborhood walk.
Yeah.
Where what are we walking, a 15, 16 minute mile pace? Mm-hmm. And just 45 minutes, which is a long time. And so plenty of times, it was 11 o'clock at night and we're just shuffling our feet, trying to keep our eyes open just to check that box. And so it's all on the honor system. On my honor, I can tell you we finished it first try. I think on the days where I don't remember ever thinking, man, I just want to quit this. There were plenty of days where out of laziness or lack of discipline, I might have just quit. Except I think there was a benefit to doing it together.
Yeah.
Like there were any second thought in my mind that I might have had about, this is stupid, was immediately dead, because if I fail, you fail. Right. So there was motivation in that too. So we set out on that journey, and 75 days later we finished. And at the midpoint, almost exactly at the midpoint, was that 24-hour mountain bike race in Bend. And I, just because I have a slim build, I had lost like a ton of weight. I was down to like 173 and scrawny, but I was fit. But because of the diet we chose, or the nutrition plan we chose, I actually was like desperate for carbs.
And it wasn't calorie restrictive.
Yeah.
It was, but we did not eat wheat.
Or potatoes.
Or potatoes. So we did have sweet potatoes.
Yeah. So I just couldn't fill my body with the complex carbs needed to ride that ride as it contributed to that ride being a little harder than it should have been, considering how good a shape I was in.
Yeah.
So, but week 1, we're on this trip to Bend. And like I said, that first week was actually made quite easy because of this trip where, the whole thing was physical activity.
Yeah.
The hardest part was trying to learn our, what we call the Jocko diet, paleo plus full fat dairy.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the hardest, was navigating eating out on basically eating meat and berries. And so we are in town. One of the things we had planned, we brought both bikes. We brought mountain bikes, which we did, but we also brought our road bikes. And this was early June. And so high desert, the summer hadn't quite arrived yet in the higher elevations. And so there was a kind of a cruddy weather day. And to give an idea, I didn't even bring warm clothes. We rode our bike, or we drove to Sun River, just south of Bend, and parked for this long road ride up to Mount Bachelor.
Yeah.
And then it was an out and back, and then loop around and come home, or back to the truck. Well, we got to Sun River, and it was in the morning, and it was freezing.
Yeah, it was cold.
And it was drizzly down there, and it was a little bit windy. And it was I'm not really dressed for this. And was that the trip we had Honeycrisp apples?
So we had, 2 Honeycrisp apples.
We had a Honeycrisp apple each.
And that was it. And no breakfast, just coffee and water. Lots of water.
Lots of water. So first things first, I'm wearing a cycling jersey of some kind, short sleeve. And so I go to a ski shop and I buy a t-shirt, an O'Neill surfboard shirt, just for a second layer under my short sleeve shirt. So I throw a t-shirt under then now I'm set. So I'm in shorts, a jersey with a t-shirt, and a head covering of some kind, and a helmet, and off we go. And so the beginning, I would say the first, 20 miles is pretty flat. Remember, it was maybe kind of gradual, which became a grind on the way back. But then you start pulling, maybe not quite 10, 20, maybe 15. You start pulling some serious elevation as you're climbing up to Mount Bachelor, to the ski resort in June. And at some point, the kind of drizzly, windy rain turns into sleet. and it turns into just the nastiest weather, like sideways sleet. We're on pretty nice road bikes. So they're very lightweight, 13, 14 pound bikes. And the wind is just blowing us around like an umbrella. And it was horrible. It was horrible. And it was cold.
It was cold. It was windy. It was not a pleasant.
So we pulled over at the snow park. As we went through the forest before we kind of got to the false summit and then made the final approach on the main highway. And we ate our Honeycrisps.
Yeah. We
devoured our Honeycrisp, core and all, probably.
I was so hungry.
So we're starving. We eat our Honeycrisps. It's never even crossing our mind that we're going to turn back. Like, we're going to make it to Mount Bachelor ski resort on our road bikes and our shorts. And the higher we get, the more it turns to sleet and not quite snow, but like frozen rain.
Yeah. And
so we finally get this highway we're on merges with the main highway, and we're finally climbing the main highway, the final approach. Let's call it the last 5-10 miles of this ride to the halfway point, right? Mind you, we're 5 or 10 miles from the halfway point. And I was like getting crabby. I had it. I'm like, this is stupid. This is terrible. This weather is dreadful. I'm miserable back here. You're a strong climber, so often on climbs, I would be behind you as you led. And you're just up there quietly slogging along. And I'm just like, I generally don't complain much, but I was
almost never. Yeah.
I'm often thinking this is terrible, but I rarely say it out loud. But I was just being very vocal about my discontent. Like, I hate road biking. This is stupid. Whatever I was saying, I don't remember. I just remember that I was hating it. And you just quietly say what?
I can't remember the exact words, but I believe it was something like, if Eugene Sledge can make it in Okinawa, you can ride this bike.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact words either, but you basically just muttered back, like no context. I'm back there complaining 3 inches from your tire as climbing up this hill, drafting you as best I can. And the wind is blowing, gusts of wind are blowing us into the road. And you just like quietly, softly mutter back something about Eugene Sledge. And I don't know why, like, it's not like that's a common everyday name, but we must have just watched the Pacific or read the Pacific or something. So his story was fresh in our minds. And so of course I knew what you meant. Like, if,
I may have just said Eugene Sledge. You know what? That was a grueling ride, and I doubt I was like in the mood to talk.
And
but it wasn't in a mean way. It was in an encouraging way, because it was so uncommon for you to get negative, especially about a physical endurance. It's very common for me to get negative and complain. Very common. I don't quit though, or give up. But so it's not common for Brandon. So when I have to encourage him in some way, it's pretty unique.
So of course she mutters back, I think you're right. I think it might have just been Eugene Sledge or something like, think of, Eugene Sledge, or what about Eugene Sledge? Something like that. And of course, what I know what you mean is like, if back in 1943 in the Pacific, those boys could run around barefoot, chasing machine guns, fighting the enemy and living in those conditions, like, suck it up, Buttercup. So I didn't mutter another word. I knew exactly what you meant. And we like to tell that story, like, to the kids who, we've told the story a handful of times, but we told the story to the kids as like, we all need encouragement sometimes.
Yeah.
Like we can all fall victim to lack of discipline or weakness. Weakness can creep in. And so we've told that story. And now we're telling it now.
Yeah. But our bike ride on just a Honeycrisp in terrible weather.
So we got to the top. The ski resort had just recently closed for the season. There was still mounds of snow. There was still snow on the ground on the slopes. The lodge was closed, covered in snow, but the parking lot was clear of snow and the road was clear of snow. And it was just horrible. And it was cold. We have pictures of it, and I might be able to find them, but we have pictures of us just standing up here and just inappropriately dressed and miserable and starving. And so we took our quick photos, high-fived. We were pretty cheerful. And I won't say it was all downhill, but it was a much easier ride back. And the lower we got, the warmer it got.
Yeah.
And then we get back, and this is just a tangent at the end. We got back to the very beginning where we had that 5 to 10 miles of pretty flat, which with a headwind is almost as bad as climbing a hill. And so that was so we're cold and wet and starving, and we're just slogging down these straight stretches that are, miles long, and you can see forever, and it's just the horizon's not getting any closer.
Yeah, and that, folks, is how you have fun together on a vacation, not on a cruise.
Would I rather do that or go on a cruise? That's a tough one. That was pretty terrible. I do remember that we got done with that. We were starving. We drove to the little overpriced grocery store and bought a 3-pound bag of dried apricots and just annihilated it.
Yeah.
What a weird thing to get.
Jerky
and beef
something
jerky.
like that, yeah.
What a weird thing to get. Okay. Well, any parting words? Okay. Well, on that note, thanks for watching.
Should have said I was grateful for the real heroes. The veterans.